Have you ever wondered how a single battle could redirect the flow of history, shaping the future of Europe and the world? The Battle of the Catalaunian Plains, one of the last major clashes of the Roman Empire, was that monumental battle. In 451 AD, the Western Roman Empire, allied with the Visigoths and other tribes, faced Attila the Hun's unstoppable force. This battle didn't just halt the Huns' relentless advance into Western Europe, it shattered their aura of invincibility. Though Attila invaded Italy the following year, he soon conceded and withdrew. 2 years later, Attila was dead, and within 16 years, his vast empire had crumbled. Trust me, you'll want to watch until the end to see all the untold events and hidden moments that reversed Attila's fortunes. In a vast plain in modern-day France, armies stretch as far as the eye can see, the tension palpable. The Huns, known for their fierce cavalry and swift archery, clashed with the disciplined Roman legions and the fierce Visigoth warriors. The stage was set for one of the most brutal battles in the ancient world. But why did this battle happen? In the mid-5th century, the Western Roman Empire was a shadow of its former glory, besieged by internal strife and external threats. Once a dominant force, the empire was now struggling to maintain control over its vast territories, including Gaul, modern-day France, a region of significant strategic and economic importance. The leadership of the Western Roman Empire, under Emperor Valentinian III, was desperate to preserve what remained of their power amidst growing instability. Exploiting the Romans' focus on other threats, Attila the Hun, whose name struck fear across Europe, had already ravaged much of Europe. The Huns were a nomadic warrior empire originating from the steppes of Central Asia. Renowned for their fierce cavalry, swift archery, and brutal tactics, the Huns under Attila's leadership became one of the most formidable military forces of the time. Attila, known as the Scourge of God, was driven by an insatiable ambition to expand his dominion. His empire, characterized by its mobility and military prowess, was less interested in territorial administration and more focused on plunder, tribute, and dominance over subjugated peoples. Attila's expansion into Gaul was driven by both strategic and economic motives. Gaul was a rich and prosperous region, vital for trade and agriculture, making it an attractive target for the Huns. Additionally, by conquering Gaul, Attila aimed to weaken the Western Roman Empire further, assert his dominance over Europe, and potentially pave the way for an eventual conquest of Rome itself. To counter this existential threat, the Roman general Flavius Aetius, a seasoned military commander with vast experience dealing with barbarian invasions, had a distinct advantage. He had spent his early years as a hostage among the Huns, spoke their language, and was familiar with their culture and tactics. Facing the overwhelming threat of Attila the Hun, Roman general Flavius Aetius understood that he needed to form a coalition to stand a chance. He forged an unlikely alliance with Theodoric I, king of the Visigoths, who recognized the mutual threat posed by Attila. Theodoric, a pragmatic and determined leader, saw this alliance as crucial for the survival of his people. Together with other Germanic tribes, they formed a coalition aimed at stopping Attila's horde in the strategically significant territory of Gaul. As we dive into the battle itself, you'll see why the Catalaunian fields were the setting for one of history's most dramatic encounters. The coalition's leaders, Aetius and Theodoric, faced the monumental task of coordinating a diverse and fragile alliance. They had to overcome differences in culture, language, and military tactics to present a united front against the Huns. Despite these challenges, they managed to unify their forces through meticulous planning and effective communication. Aetius and Theodoric employed several key strategies to bolster their chances against Attila's formidable army. They capitalized on their combined strengths: the disciplined Roman legions, the fierce Visigothic warriors, and additional forces from allied tribes like the Franks, Burgundians, and Alans. They coordinated their movements and communication to ensure unity and effectiveness in battle. They chose the battleground strategically. The Catalaunian fields provided terrain that could neutralize some of the Huns' advantages in cavalry and mobility. By positioning their forces effectively, They aimed to disrupt the Hunnic formations and limit their ability to execute swift, devastating attacks. On that fateful morning of June 20th, 451, the armies of Attila the Hun and the Roman-led coalition under Aetius and Theodoric of the Visigoths faced each other on the Catalaunian Plains in Gaul. They set up about a mile apart, trying to size each other up without getting too close. On the right side of the Visigothic line, you had Theodoric the Hun commanding his troops. They were mainly infantry, forming this solid shield wall to protect themselves from those Hunnic mounted archers, who were quite fearsome. Behind the Visigothic infantry were their archers, and right at the back, waiting patiently, was their cavalry under Theodoric I's son, Thorismund. In the center, you had the Alans. These folks were really committed to the fight because their homes were right there, threatened by the Huns and their puppet Franks. They knew they had to give it their all to protect what was theirs. On the other side, you had Attila's forces all lined up. He himself was right in the middle with his best cavalry. On his left were the Ostrogoths, also with infantry and cavalry. They were facing Theodoric I's and the Visigoths. And on Attila's right, you had Frankish and Gepid infantry and cavalry, ready to take on the Romans and their foederati. The tension rising, each side staring across the field, knowing that in just a moment, all hell might break loose. These were massive armies. Both sides had gathered about 50,000 men each, making it a monumental clash with around 100,000 warriors altogether. It was the largest gathering of warriors Gaul had seen in ages. Attila led the Huns sparked the conflict with a fierce charge right down the middle. The ground trembled under the thundering hooves of thousands of Hunnic horses, a sound that had struck fear across lands from China all the way to Gaul. As they closed in on their enemies, that fear only intensified. The Alans, bless them, tried to push back against the Hun attack, but they were quickly overwhelmed by the sheer skill and strength of the Huns. Forced to retreat, they left the field somewhat exposed. Attila then split his forces, sending them east and west to rain arrows down upon the Visigoths and Romans from a distance. Despite the Hun arrows, those Visigoths and Roman shield walls held firm, and their archers managed to inflict some serious damage on the enemy. But you see, that was just part of Attila's grand plan. The Hunnic cavalry, they maneuvered to the far right and left, That strategic move exposed the Allied infantry that had been lurking behind them, shielded from view until then. It was a bold play, designed to unsettle their enemies. The Huns didn't stop there. They launched a second charge right towards the open center of the battlefield. That initial orderly formation they had was shattered in an instant, as thousands of horsemen clashed in chaotic melee. It was a sight to behold, with the Ostrogoths, Franks and Gepids, crashing headlong into the lines of the Visigoths and Romans. With nearly 100,000 warriors locked in fierce combat, the ferocity of those Ostrogoths, Franks, and Gepids was undeniable. They fought tooth and nail against the Visigoths and Romans, pushing hard with every ounce of strength they had. But the Romans and their allies had a clever advantage: their archers. Those archers rained down a relentless barrage of arrows, giving their infantry crucial time to maintain their defensive line. Amidst the chaos, tragedy struck when Theodoric Thorns, leading the Visigoths, was struck down by an arrow and killed. It was a blow felt deeply among his troops, but leadership didn't falter. His son, Thorismund, took charge, leading their cavalry in a desperate bid to turn the tide. And let's not forget the Alans, who regrouped swiftly and charged forward once more, while the Roman cavalry thundered in from the left flank, seeking to capitalize on any weakness in the Hunnic ranks. What remained was complete disorder and chaos. Both armies clashed with a ferocity that shook the very ground beneath them. From afternoon well into the late evening, the battlefield echoed with the cries of men locked in brutal combat. Soldiers on both sides found themselves in a whirlwind of confusion, unsure at times who they were fighting and who stood beside them. By the 5th century, things had changed drastically for the Roman army. They couldn't provide the standardized uniforms they once did, and as a result, many soldiers ended up dressing much like their Germanic adversaries. It's quite something to think about. Roman legionaries, once so distinctive in their appearance, now blending in with those they once considered barbarians. And here's the twist. Many of those Germanic groups weren't just fighting against Rome. They found themselves fighting on both sides of the conflict. Imagine the challenge for those soldiers, facing off against foes who looked much like their own comrades. It added a layer of complexity to an already chaotic scene, where the lines between friend and foe blurred in the heat of battle. Under the cover of darkness, Aetius quietly ordered his forces to retreat, slipping away in the early hours. Attila, alerted by his scouts to this strategic withdrawal, made the pragmatic decision to march his armies back towards their stronghold along the Danube. Aetius, ever astute, realized that pressing further was untenable. The Visigoths, now led by Thorismund following the death of his father Theodoric I, were urging a retreat. Bereft of their king and far from home, their zeal for continuing the fight against the Huns waned. Aetius, with his deep-seated knowledge of alliances and suspicions, feared the Visigoths might shift their focus towards Rome once the immediate threat of the Huns receded. Meanwhile, Attila, having inflicted considerable harm upon his adversaries, saw no compelling reason to prolong the conflict. His foes were sufficiently weakened, leaving the Franks unable to mount any serious challenge. First light of morning pierced through the haze of battle, revealing a haunting tableau of carnage, decomposing bodies, blood-soaked earth, and the stench of mud. It was a moment of grim reflection for both commanders, each pondering their next strategic move. Yet, despite the fierce clashes of the previous day, neither Attila nor Aetius had achieved the decisive victory they sought. With that, Attila's campaign in Gaul drew to a close, marking a pivotal moment in the broader tapestry of European history. The implications of the Battle of Catalaunian Fields were profound. By stopping the Huns, the Western Roman Empire bought itself precious time, delaying its eventual collapse and influencing the power dynamics of medieval Europe. The survival of Roman and Visigothic forces ensured that the cultural and political landscapes of Europe would develop without Hunnic domination, preserving essential elements of Roman law, governance, and infrastructure that would shape the continent's future. The success of the coalition set a powerful precedent for future alliances among European tribes and nations, showcasing the effectiveness of unity against a common enemy. Attila's subsequent invasion of Italy in 452 initially succeeded due to the exhaustion and depletion of the Roman army. He managed to ransack the northern regions, causing widespread devastation. However, his campaign was abruptly halted by an outbreak of disease, forcing him to retreat before he could besiege Rome itself. Despite winning many battles and causing significant destruction, Attila could not achieve his ultimate goal of conquering the Western Roman Empire outright. The end of Attila's reign came swiftly and unexpectedly. He died in 453 during a marriage festival for his newest wife, a sudden event that plunged the Hunnic Empire into chaos. His death triggered a succession crisis, leading to a brutal civil war among his sons, which ultimately destroyed the Hunnic Empire and ended its threat to Europe. Within 16 years of Attila's death, the vast empire he had built had crumbled, leaving a lasting legacy on the historical and political landscape of Europe.